The bailiff hadn't finished latching the courtroom door when my sister raised a press release declaring herself sole heir to our $28 million fortune. I'm Ellison Blythe, 57-year-old internal auditor gripping father's red wax envelope while the fluorescents hiss overhead, its seal gleaming like a loaded trigger. She trusts ink. I trust what's hidden in that wax. What would you stake on a single unread clause? The room held its breath as Miles Wiltsh's voice cut through the fan-churned air. All liquid assets, he read, are to be transferred without restriction to Caledonia Blythe Spruill. My name didn't follow, not even as a footnote. My fingers curled slow and tight around the envelope in my lap, the one sealed with thick red wax and my full name written in father's rigid hand. The seal hadn't been broken. Not yet. The heat of the Savannah afternoon pressed against the tall windows, thick with the scent of river silt and old wood polish. Above us, ceiling fans groaned in weary rotation, barely keeping pace with the tension that now pulsed across the gleaming mahogany table. Across from me, Caledonia smiled. Not the kind smile you'd offer at the reading of a will. This one was sharp. She held her pearl-handled pen like a dagger, tapping its tip gently against the oak armrest, as if she already owned it. Mother seated at her left wore her brittle smile, the one she reserved for funerals and gala fundraisers. She didn't look at me. Her eyes tracked every twitch of the notary's hand as though she were counting commas. Miles cleared his throat, his linen collar damp around the edges. Per your father's instructions, the estate shall retain its trust structure. However, the liquid assets, totaling $28 million before taxes and administrative fees, shall pass directly to the designated heir. Caledonia shifted ever so slightly, the sound of silk rustling under confidence. No one asked if I had questions, but Miles offered a dry smile anyway. I'll need a certified copy of the full will, I said, voice even. Audit compliance. A lie, but a convenient one. Of course, Miles said quickly. We'll provide the final signed document. I nodded gently, thumbing the edge of my envelope. The wax seal had cooled years ago, but under my skin it still felt warm, alive. I noticed something I hadn't the first time he'd handed it to me. Back when Father's handwriting was still sharp, beneath the formal crest sat a second seal. Fainter. His personal seal used only on documents he never wanted rewritten. A clause, perhaps. A note. Or an afterthought he intended only I should see. I'll also need the signing dates on all attachments, I added casually. Certainly, Miles said. We can include metadata. Mother finally glanced my way, her look unreadable. For a second, just a second, something flickered behind her composure, an old worry perhaps. Then she blinked it away and returned to watching Caledonia sign the transfer forms like an heiress accepting a crown. Flashes popped from the hallway. Caledonia had invited the press. Not for the story, but for the legacy portrait that would come next. I leaned back as she tucked the pen into her clutch and said, "Sweet as honeysuckle. Imagine how quickly 28 million can disappear in the wrong hands." Then she smiled directly at me. It wasn't anger that stirred in me. Not shame either. Just a thrum of resolve, ancient and heavy, like the click of an old safe opening after decades of dust. The grandfather clock chimed 3. The room stood. Chairs slid. Condolences were murmured in efficient, meaningless tones. I stayed behind a moment longer, letting the air settle, fingers still on the envelope. The wax had begun to soften under my grip. I stepped out last. The hallway was cooler, though the tension clung like lint. Miles caught up to me by the elevator. He didn't meet my eyes when he handed me the small folded paper. It was already damp at the corners from his nervous grip. Your father added something he said under his breath. After December 2019. He didn't elaborate. He didn't need to. Where I asked. Miles hesitated. Then, check the cellar ledger. I nodded once. The elevator door opened and I stepped inside, a lone envelope in one hand, the memo in the other. Below, Savannah's streets shimmered in the summer light, unchanged, but suddenly unfamiliar. There are moments in life when legacy shifts shape. Mine had just slipped through my sister's fingers and left a red wax trail in its wake. The dining room at Blythe Landing had always looked like a museum exhibit, oak paneling chandelier dripping crystal sepia portraits of naval captains scowling down the decades. Tonight it smelled of citrus glaze and thunder. Mother stood at the head of the 14-foot table, her champagne flute held high, the thin stem trembling only enough for me to notice. To responsible stewardship, she intoned. Candlelight flickered across the silver tureen in front of me. The lid quivered because my hands hidden beneath the tablecloth were shaking against its pedestal base. I pinched my palms until the porcelain steadied. Rain rattled against the shutters. Somewhere beyond, the marsh lightning cracked booming through the bones of the house. Caledonia laughed too brightly at the storm and poured another splash of wine. Her cheeks were already rouge-warm. Her eyes, however, tracked every breath I took. "Here's to burying 12 ugly digits before month-end," she said, swirling the glass so hard a few drops leapt onto the damask. "Numbers belong in the ground, don't you think? L12 ugly digits. Loan number 12309. Confirmation delivered in a careless toast. I smiled as though I hadn't heard wiped condensation from my goblet, and let the words settle like lead shot in the pit of my stomach. Old Ned shuffled in, carrying the soup-course blue crab bisque that smelled of sherry and low-country tide pools. He caught my eye for half a second. The crease at his temple deepened. Now I gave the faintest nod. I lifted a spoonful of bisque, inhaled the steam of saffron and shell, and felt a migraine blooming conveniently behind my left eye. "Forgive me," I said, pressing fingers to my temple. "The heat must have gotten to me this afternoon." Mother's smile tightened but held. "You should lie down, dear." She cared only insofar as a fainting sun would ruin her tableau. Caledonia arched a brow. "Take one of my tablets," she offered, voice honey-dragged by wine. "They work wonders. You'll wake up and forget all about numbers." Another lightning flash lit the room. For a heartbeat, her shadow leapt across the wall, tall and crooked. I rose, cloth napkins still in hand. Ned moved behind Caledonia, bowing low. "Begging pardon, ma'am, seems we've mislaid the dessert spoon that matches this set." "Might you recall whether it was laid here earlier?" He pointed toward her place setting. Wineglass in one hand, she twisted to look. "Are we truly out here searching spoons in a thunderstorm?" she muttered, half amused, half irritated. "Perfect." I slipped out, made for the back stairs. My polished shoes skidded once on the runner as thunder cracked again closer. The house was an ark creaking in heavy seas. Down 2 flights, the air cooled by 10 degrees and smelled of wet stone. The cellar door still bore Father's brass plate, James C. Blythe, 1940-2020, tarnished since the funeral. I entered the passcode I'd memorized at 17, the hull number of his first tug. The lock clicked. Inside, single bulbs hummed overhead. Wooden shelves bowed under ledgers bound in midnight blue canvas. In the center stood Father's safe, a matte black cube fat with secrets. The combination spun beneath my fingertips. He never changed it after Mother complained it was too convoluted for guests. The door yawned open. I smelled leather ink, the ghost of cigar smoke. One by one I lifted the ledgers onto a trestle table, splitting their stiff spines so they lay flat. Phone in one hand, I photographed page after page, revenues, disbursements, the steady heartbeat of a company, and the arrhythmia of a single reckless loan. Page 153, 12 to 319, $12,000. Drawn, May 3rd, 2021. Signatory C. Blythe. Father's counter-signature box, blank a grim silence on cream paper. The ceiling creaked footsteps overhead, muffled by rugs. Ned's voice drifted up, warm and slow as syrup, keeping Caledonia occupied with the spoon charade. I quickened my pace. Flash, turn, page, flash again. Thunder jostled dust from the rafters. It fell like ash onto the open bindings. 30 minutes later, the gallery icon on my phone read, 187 photos. I opened my mail client, attached them in 3 batches, and set a delayed send 7 days, 900 a.m. Subject line anchor. The program confirmed the timer green tick bright against the dark. The safe door eased shut with a muted boom. I wiped my prints from the dial with my cuff habit, learned auditing sticky-fingered branch managers. Then everything changed in a single, perfect beat of lightning. Footsteps on the cellar stairs. I froze between shelf and table. The bulb above me sputtered. Caledonia's silhouette appeared at the top landing, framed by the flicker of stormlight hair, loose wineglass, now empty mouth, a hard line. Ellison. Her voice floated down, velvet edged in suspicion. I stayed still, breath snagged in my throat. The bulb popped. Darkness swallowed the room. Glass clinked on metal as she fumbled for a switch. I thumbed send, overriding the delay, letting the photos fly to cloud and back again, then slipped the phone into my pocket. A click echoed the lock sliding home from the outside. Her footsteps retreated up the stairs, deliberate heel meeting tread like a metronome. The only light left was a seam of flickering storm through the jam. I exhaled the sound loud as surf in the closed space. The envelope in my coat rustled, a reminder of what still rested sealed untouched. Above me, a door slammed. Rain hammered the roof wild and insistent. The cellar smelled of damp ink and electric dust. Somewhere behind stone walls, time ticked toward a 7-day fuse, and every digit ugly or not waited to tell its story. Dawn rolled in like pale smoke, coiling over the Savannah River until the far bank vanished. The tin roof of Dockside Diner pinged with gull splatter as I pushed through its screen door and breathed in chicory diesel and brine, the trinity of River Street. Inside, a single bulb flickered above a warped Formica counter. Loring Hale already occupied a back booth cane propped beside him, steam ghosting from 2 cups. He didn't greet me, just slid a dog-eared fax across the wobbly table. The paper was thin enough to show the grain of wood beneath. My name, forged in thick black toner, blazed through the flimsy sheet. Authorization for a $12 million drawdown, he said, voice as dry as sun-bleached rope. Signed at 02:07 hours 3rd of May last year. Your handwriting according to the bank. I traced the loop of the signature perfect mimicry of the flourish Father taught me in 7th grade. Heat gathered behind my eyes, but I kept my palm flat. Caledonia, I asked. Hale's cuff shifted, revealing the faded outline of a navy anchor on his wrist. "Your sister lacks the patience," he murmured. "She outsourced the forgery, no doubt. But she carried it out just the same. Rain from the night storm hadn't fully drained. Gutters gurgled outside. A tug's horn wailed and the window rattled in its frame. Hale sipped his coffee, grimaced, and looked at me over the rim. "Your father trusted tides and backup plans," he said. "Clause 15C is real locked in probate with a court seal. We need proof of her misconduct before we pry that clause open." My goal crystallized to track the midnight bank visit, lock the evidence, and do it before the bank's 30-day retention cycle wiped the tapes. 6 days left. The diner door creaked again, letting in a slash of gray light and a young man who moved like he hadn't slept. Duke Ransom's sallow cheeks, busted thumbnail, wrapped in neon tape college sweatshirt that had seen better decades. He lifted a hand at me, unsure, then beeline to the counter for free refills. I motioned him over. "Duke, meet Mr. Hale." Duke sat, eyes darting. "Told my boss I'm grabbing breakfast," he muttered. "Clock's running." Hale tapped the fax. "We need the rooftop camera archive from First Coastal Bank. May 3rd 0200 to 0300. Your badge still grants after-hours access?" Duke swallowed. "I can reboot the archive server. Yeah. But the retention's set to purge in under a week. Legal says we only keep 30 days. Then we interrupt the tide," Hale said. "You'll enable a hidden export?" "Yes." Duke rubbed the neon tape over his nail, weighing tuition payments against risk. "I'm on the hook for student debt till my beard goes gray." He sighed. "So, okay. But I need secure storage." I pulled a blister pack thumb drive from my jacket, the cheap kind you buy with cash and no questions. On its plastic shell I'd scrawled, "Anchor Alt" in marker. "You image the backup here," I told him. "Encrypt it if you know how, then drop it in my P.O. box. Don't label it. The zip code is enough. After that, wipe your tracks." Duke pocketed the drive like contraband. "You never saw me," he said, half joking. Mabel Joe River Street's unofficial librarian shuffled over with a slice of peach cobbler the size of a life raft. Gospel hummed in her throat as she refilled Hale's cup. "You boys chasing fog this early?" she asked, amused. "Chasing truth," Hale said. "Same thing," she cackled, then ambled off, humming Wade in the Water as pages of cargo manifests fluttered from the stack beside her. Hale waited until she was out of earshot. "I'll pull the probate docket," he said, fingers drumming the cane. "Clause 15C will stay sealed unless we demonstrate malfeasance. That video buys us leverage." Duke checked his phone anxiety ticking in his knee. "I can slip back in tonight. No cameras in the equipment room. Irony, huh?" The screen door slammed. A gust of river air swept steam across the tabletop, fogging my half-full mug. I pressed the cup against the fax, leaving a perfect wet ring that bled ink along the edge of my forged name. "Your father trusted tides." The phrase clanged in my head. Tides recede, but never disappear. Their memory stains pilings and souls alike. Midnight entry, 0214. "Exit," Hale said. He had produced a photocopy of the bank's night log date badge ID signature block again forged. "Camera angle should show her face if the resolution holds." "It's grainy," Duke warned. "Analog feed up there. Bank never upgraded." "Grainy is enough," Hale replied. A shadow that tall wearing your sister's brooch will do. A metallic shriek cut across the diner as a tug nudged its barge into position. The vibration rattled the sugar dispensers. I exhaled, steadying my coffee. When this is over, I told Duke there's a dock workers' scholarship fund looking for an IT tech. Steady hours tuition assistance. Consider it. His eyes softened. Capture the proof first, he said. Then we'll talk scholarships. Hale rose, joints popping like rifle bolts. Tick-tock sun, he wheezed, lifting the cane. Tides don't wait. We paid and stepped into the mist. Fog dampened my jacket. Gulls screamed overhead, invisible in the pearly gloom. Duke peeled off toward the bank hoodie, upstride reluctant but determined. Hale and I reached the pier railing river, rolling beneath us like tarnished pewter. He placed a bony hand on my shoulder. Remember, he said she counts on you being loud. Be tidal instead, silent, relentless. I nodded. My phone vibrated. Anchor 6 days. The countdown stared back like an hourglass flipped in reverse grains already tumbling. Far down the wharf, diesel snarled as cargo cranes woke for the shift. Somewhere in that clatter, I accepted that legacies aren't inherited. They're audited. And audits begin at dawn with coffee fog and a forged signature that refuses to stay buried. Caledonia hit the records room door so hard the hinges squealed. Her heels cracked across the concrete echo, bouncing off rows of ledgers like pistol shots. I froze behind a stack of inventory books, phone already filming. Looking for bedtime stories, she snapped. Her gaze combed the room, catching the red envelope on a rolling cart. In a single stride, she seized it. Wax shimmered under the sputtering fluorescent tube. Leave it, I said, stepping into view. Too late. She tore downward. Crimson shards drifted to the floor, dry as old blood on canvas. You never could mind your own columns, she hissed, voice brittle as cracked ice. Half the secondary crest. Father's private seal dangled by a wet strip of parchment, the number 15C glinting where she'd split it. Proof of tampering plain as a fingerprint. My camera trembled, but the feed kept rolling. Caledonia's eyes narrowed, filming me. For the audit, I answered, letting the words settle. Audits were my territory. She knew it. She spotted Nora Keswick at a workstation green monitor, glow reflecting off peppermint pink lips. Delete whatever that is, Caledonia ordered, waving the torn envelope like a surrender flag she didn't recognize. Nora's gum froze mid-chew. Corporate policy requires dual authorization. She said it with the careful accent of someone quoting scripture but fearing lightning. Caledonia's phone rang in her purse, an impatient trill. She glanced, cursed softly, and spun for the door. The room swallowed her perfume as the door smashed shut behind her. I exhaled. Dust motes drifted in the stale air drawn by the lone exhaust fan. Its blades turned so lazily, each pulse of light looked like a stutter in time. "Did you get it?" Nora asked, voice low. I stopped recording, saved the file, and slipped the phone into my chest pocket. Every flake of wax. I kneeled, brushing shards into a small evidence envelope, the kind auditors use for cash skims. Each red sliver pinged faintly as it hit the manila. Across the room, Duke Ransom radioed from the security desk, his voice crackling through a speaker. Heads up, the main feed's glitching. Looks like someone scrubbed footage between 0200 and 0300 hours last month. Disk sector's gone. Nora's shoulders tensed. That's the default overwrite window. I straightened envelope sealed. We still have the auxiliary camera, your desk cam. She swiveled to her console fingers, tapping a fast percussion. Pulling now. The monitors hiccuped, then displayed the grainy footage, Caledonia entering, ripping, exiting. Timestamps stamped bright in the corner. Nora duplicated the clip to the thumb drive labeled Anchor Alt Duke had slipped to her the night before. The fluorescent tube above us flickered twice, then steadied. I recognized the telltale hum of power pre-brownout. Summer storms made the grid twitchy this close to the water. Copy at 89%, Nora said. Peppermint bit the musty air. Route a shadow copy to the mail server, I added. Same delay as my anchor files. She tapped, jaw flexing. Done. I walked to the server rack. Drives, word, indicator, LEDs blinking emerald and amber like harbor buoys. Duke's voice returned lower. UPS battery says 5 minutes max. Thunder rolling upriver. A distant boom underscored his warning. Hold the transfer. Nora muttered, eyes on a progress bar, creeping. 89 became 98. The lights died. Fan blades coasted to silence. In the sudden dark, the only sound was the ticking of the raid array winding down. Nora swore. I counted heartbeats. Then the UPS kicked in. Beep, beep, servers buzzing back to life. LEDs winked uncertain but alive. Screen text flickered. Transfer complete. A small green checkmark pulsed like a firefly. Nora sagged in relief, mint gum snapping. We're live again. Copy verified. My phone vibrated. First, the silent buzz of the Anchor app upload received. 76 May died. Then a text from Hale Quill moved hearing to Friday. Brace. I glanced at the evidence envelope, then at the torn wax crest still clinging to a corner of parchment on the cart. One half of Father's seal, now the other half bagged in my pocket. Forensic labs loved puzzles with missing pieces. Lock the rack, I told Nora. Pull the network cable, leave power only. She did hands steady now that the danger felt technical again. Duke's footsteps approached. Battery lantern in hand, he surveyed the room. Main feeds toast. Someone zero-filled sectors. Let her think it worked, I said. The fail-safes are louder in court. A gust rattled metal roll-up doors down the hallway. The river storm was arriving. Peppermint and ozone mingled sharp enough to sting. My phone buzzed again. Anchor arrival T4 days. The countdown digits glowed white afterimage in the dark screen. Somewhere below that notification, Hale's message blinked emergency probate Friday. Tick-tock. Thunder cracked overhead, vibrating the roof like a drummer on sheet metal. The fluorescent tube tried to relight, sputtered, succeeded on the third attempt, bathing the archive in sickly blue-white. I pocketed the envelope, nodded to Nora, and headed for the exit. The envelope scraped against the red wax shards, proof that something once whole had been broken, and that the break itself now told a louder story than the seal ever could. Outside, the storm let loose at last. Rain hammered the tin roof, rinsing the world of its grime, but inside my jacket, the evidence stayed dry and waiting heartbeat steady, ticking like the mail that was already on its way. Reporters swarmed the courthouse steps like summer gnats, their camera rigs glittering in the Savannah sun. The humidity wrapped every body in damp gauze, yet Caledonia looked ice-cool, flawless in gray silk that matched the marble portico behind her. She posed beneath the columned arch, left hand signing a pre-hearing press release on a clipboard balanced by her public relations man. Flashbulbs stuttered. Today, she told the microphone's voice, syrup smooth, we secure the Blythe family legacy. I moved past the scrum thumb, working the flash drive in my pocket like a rosary bead. Pulse steady. Not vindictive, just prepared. The courthouse's oak door swallowed me, trading chaos for cool lemon oil air. Inside the probate courtroom was all paneled gravitas, high-ceiling fans slow paddling the river's humidity 4 blocks away. Loring Hale was already seated at counsel table cane across his knees, face carved from courtroom stone. He didn't nod when I sat beside him. He merely slid a folded note my way. Stay river calm. Judge Mercer Quill entered in a hush. He carried a slim lead-gray folder, its spine embossed 15C in gold, so faint you had to know where to look. His gavel met wood once. Echoes stacked in the rafters. On docket, he said, voice coarse as dock rope, Blythe estate petition for partial distribution. Caledonia rose with her counsel, a silver-haired litigator named Jason Orr. Your Honor, the estate faces urgent capital restructuring. Petition seeks release of liquid assets already legally transferred. Hale pushed himself upright. Your Honor, before we indulge urgency defense files motion, a video evidence obtained under statute permitting corporate records preservation. He clicked a remote. Monitors flickered. Grainy night vision footage filled each screen. The timestamp screamed 02:14 a.m. 05:03:21. Caledonia stepped from a service entrance of First Coastal Bank manila envelope, clutched tight, high heels glinting under security lamps. A hush fell so complete you could hear ceiling fans slice muggy air. Orr attempted a scoff. Low resolution, no positive ID. Pause. Hale barked. The video froze. He zoomed on the brooch at her lapel, a custom piece Mother commissioned a silver dogwood blossom with 3 pearls. The gallery gasped recognition, rippling like dropped stone rings. I stood. Supplemental Exhibit B, Loan Number 12, 319 Records. I said, handing the clerk a binder plus unsigned pension checks dated the following week. Or objected foundation-relevant spectacle. But Quill waved him silent, reviewing the documents with reading glasses perched half-mast. The room waited sweating beneath the oak beams. Ezra Pike, dock worker representative, sat in the front pew. Salt-scored hands clenched a battered cap. His brow showed sun-creased anger and hope. Quill closed the binder. Court will recess 45 minutes for forensic verification. The gavel struck. The room exhaled in fractured whispers. Outside the chamber doors, cameras pounced. Mr. Blythe care to comment click-click lenses seeking evidence of family fracture. I raised a hand without stopping. Facts first, commentary later. In a side alcove, Hale leaned on his cane. Sweat darkened his collar. Digital forensics need 10 minutes, he murmured, but judges like pomp. Gives press time to churn. My phone vibrated, anchor upload 100%. The timed emails, ledgers, photographs, CCTV backups had arrived in my inbox, timestamp stamped and metadata clean. I let a breath escape. When court reconvened, Quill's expression was tidal calm. Evidence authenticated, he announced. Badge logs, pension checks, and surveillance establish probable malfeasance. Orr tried again. My client acted within her fiduciary counsel. Quill cut in, until this court determines entitlement under Clause 15C. No funds move. The gavel rapped 3 deliberate beats. All Blythe assets are hereby frozen for 48 hours, pending emergency review. The gallery reacted like wind through cane-sharp inhalation's rustling fabric. Ezra whisper prayed. Reporters scribbled. Caledonia's pen slipped from her fingers, clattering on hardwood like a spent casing. She kept her smile, but sweat haloed the silk at her collarbones. Quill adjourned. Cameras scrambled as doors burst open. I felt dozens of lenses swing my way, but my gaze tracked the judge's folder 15C, now resting under his arm like a sealed verdict. In the corridor, Hale whispered, "Tomorrow he'll break the seal." He tapped the cane once. "Be ready for the tide to change direction." My phone buzzed again. Anchor countdown now reading T3 days, 23, 59, 12. I thumbed the notification away, slipped outside into the press gauntlet, and let flashbulbs paint the afternoon white. The river smell reached even here, brine and engine grease, a reminder that tides turn without ceremony, only certainty. The courtroom felt smaller at midday, as if the walls had crept inward overnight. Air conditioning hiccuped, then wheezed itself useless. A wet hush settled over polished mahogany like steam on glass. I dabbed my collar with a handkerchief and tried not to notice how my pulse throbbed against the flash drive in my pocket. Judge Mercer Quill strode in without preamble, lead grey folder tucked beneath his arm. Even the reporters fell silent. He sat unfolded the torn envelope, now evidence-bagged, and with a penknife neatly sliced the wax still clinging to its edge. A single cream-colored page slid free. It trembled between his fingers, the way a sail flutters before catching wind. "This," he said, voice rasping like rope over wood, "is your father's amendment, dated December 18th, 2019. He began to read. Clause 15C. Any heir free of encumbrance and acting for the collective welfare of Blythe Maritime employees shall inherit in trust the corpus to be held foremost for pension obligations. A murmur rippled through the gallery dockworkers in Sunday shirts courthouse staff, a smattering of curious locals. Somewhere, someone's boutonniere of magnolia sagged in the heat, its fragrance faint but persistent. Caledonia sat rigid, mascara smudged under one eye like a bruise. Grant Moss, counsel for First Coastal Bank, clutched a thick margin call letter in both hands, as though hoping it might dissolve. Quill fixed him with a gaze. "Mr. Moss, do you confirm the loan default now exceeds $12 million?" Moss cleared his throat. "Yes, Your Honor. Past due with penalties accumulating daily." Quill turned to Caledonia. "Any rebuttal?" She opened her mouth, closed, it opened again. The silence around her was merciless. Hale rose beside me, cane planted like a flag. "Your Honor." Additional exhibit freeze notice on the Blythe Pension Fund signed but never processed. He laid the document atop the clerk's stack. "My turn?" I stood. "For the record, I accept the inheritance only if structured as a blind trust managed by independent fiduciaries. All $28 million will first restore pension liabilities and repay outstanding debts." I heard my own voice steady like a hull cutting water. Quill regarded me, eyes flinty. "You waive direct control, I do, sir. The trust charter is prepared for your review." I pushed the folder across the table signed, and witnessed ready for his ink. A bead of sweat slid from his temple. He ignored it, scanning the pages. Then one crisp stroke he signed. The clerk stamped. The gavel fell. Order entered. Assets placed under blind trust. Ms. Blythe Spruill is hereby removed from financial authority pending separate proceedings. It was not a shout, not even loud yet. The words cracked through the room like a released cable. Ezra Pike, seated with the dock workers, rose first. Others followed row by row, a silent ovation, caps to chests, heads bowed. The floorboards groaned under the collective weight of gratitude. Caledonia gripped the rail legs, unsure beneath silk. For a moment she looked smaller than I remembered, as if every dollar she had claimed had been adding inches to her spine. Cameras began clicking sharp, staccato, unkind. The shutters froze her stumble forever. Quill adjourned with one final tap. Conversation erupted as people filed out, but within the churn I felt an odd quiet blooming like the sudden release of a long-held breath. Hale touched my elbow. "You did it without thunder," he said, voice threading above the din. From his jacket he retrieved the torn envelope edges now housed in a transparent sleeve. "Mend it," he whispered. "People need symbols." His eyes, normally slate cold, held a flicker of warmth. Gold in the fracture sun. Show them how to fill the break? Flashbulbs burst, coloring the air with white heat. I slipped the sleeve inside my portfolio, already imagining brass and glass, and a small plaque that said nothing about victory and everything about repair. Outside, reporters called my name, asking how it felt to lose $28 million in exchange for principle. I thought about Father's pen stroke, the tide, the men and women whose backs bore our freight. I thought about Caledonia mascara running like melted ink, and about tides that turn without asking permission. "It feels like the right ledger finally balanced," I said. Then I stepped into the Savannah Glare Trust charter in hand-torn seal pressed against my heart and let the cameras capture whatever face justice wears at noon. The bell over the framing shop door jingled once, then settled into hush. Sunlight pooled across the hardwood, catching motes of sawdust that drifted like slow snow. On the workbench lay the torn envelope, its wound already filled with ribbons of molten brass that cooled to a soft gold seam. Legal kintsugi. The framer, a taciturn woman with a jeweler's loop, pressed a final brass plaque beneath the glass. "Let justice mend what blood could not." The words glimmered steady as a promise. I thanked her, slid the finished piece into a padded sleeve, and stepped onto Broughton Street, the winter sun crisp against my collar. 2 hours later, the envelope hung on a freshly whitewashed brick wall inside the Blind Trust office. A renovated rigging warehouse whose rafters still smelled of tar and pine. Afternoon light slanted through clerestory windows, striping the wide planks in warm gold. The framed seal caught that light. The brass scar burned gently like a coal that would never cool. Loring Hale watched from a bar-height table strewn with charts. He leaned on his cane less these days, though he still kept it close like tradition. "Transition timeline," he said, tapping the papers. "First pension payments resume March 1st. Interest on arrears already wired. Grant Moss arrived next, tireless humility stitched into every buttonhole." The bank's quarter-page apology ad had run in the Savannah Morning News for 3 straight Sundays, but contrition looked heavier in person. We signed the final waiver together, penalties forgiven in exchange for immediate restitution. Moss's ink flowed smoothly. Redemption apparently had fresh cartridges. Caledonia entered last. The echo of her heels faltered on the threshold. She carried a slim clutch. I imagined the weight inside not cosmetics, but the term sheet we'd couriered this morning. Her eyes flicked to the framed envelope, lingered on the gold seam, then slid to me. I offered a chair. Hale remained standing silent witness. Grant Moss excused himself with a nod and left us in charged quiet. Caledonia placed the clutch on the table, withdrew the documents. Her fingernails were bare now, polish abandoned. Non-voting seat, she read, voice low. Annual stipend donated to the pension surplus account. Public apology at the riverfront launch. Condition precedent, I said. Words matter. She inhaled, shoulders rising as though the air itself weighed tons. You know how many times Mother said a blithe never bends. Bending saved the masts, I replied. Stiff ones snapped in storms. Silence settled dust floating between us. Outside, a tugboat horn moaned up the river, long and lonesome. Pen trembling, she signed. A single tear tracked down her cheek, landing on the parchment with an audible dot. She wiped it away, but the stain remained a watermark of consequence. Hale slid the signed sheet into a folder. "Welcome to a quieter legacy," he said. His voice held neither triumph nor pity, only finality. Caledonia stood eyes shiny and left without her heels daring to echo. The warehouse fell calm. I mounted the envelope myself, tightening brass screws into brick. When the last one bit the spotlight above, lit the frame fully. The gold seam glowed. The room the world took a small, even breath. In that hush, a courier knocked. Embossed parchment bore the Maritime Union's seal. "You are cordially invited to keynote the reopening of Blythe Harbor House, June 16th, 2024. I read it twice, felt the tide inside me shift. I looked at the healed envelope, thought of Father's trembling post-stroke hand forging Clause 15C. Thought of tides of anchors of legacy re-rigged to hold more than one family's pride. The smell of soldering flux still lingered, mingling with fresh coffee from the break room. Outside, gulls wheeled against a pale February sky, their cries thin but insistent reminders that the river kept moving, that scars could carry shine, that even broken seals might steer ships home. Brass began as a single heartbeat, tuba breathing low snare, tapping like distant raindrops. Beneath the repainted gantry, cranes bunting snapped red-white navy against evening breeze. Workers in pressed shirts, children riding shoulders, reporters with notebooks half shut. They all drifted toward the makeshift dais assembled on the old loading dock. The peach-gold sunset spilled across the river, turning ripples into hammered copper. I stood just off stage, speech folded inside my vest pocket, palms warming the paper. Caledonia waited beside me in a charcoal suit so plain it almost hid her, yet nothing could hide the tremor in her breath. Mother Augusta Fay clutched lace gloves, eyes glassy as if afraid to blink and lose the moment. The brass band eased into a slow gospel march. Ezra Pike raised a hand. The crowd settled. He welcomed everyone to Blythe Harbor House, the words echoing beneath steel cranes, newly coated in maritime blue. When applause faded, he gestured for Caledonia. She walked the short distance to the microphone. Her heels clicked once, twice, and then she stopped. Sunset light kissed the tear track on her cheek before she spoke. "I owe you honesty," she began, voice thin but clear. "I took what wasn't mine. I forgot who keeps this river moving." She looked out at the workers, pensioners, riggers, mechanics, then at Mother, then finally at me. Today, the river forgives if we do. The microphone picked up the quiver on forgives. Applause rose anyway, gentle as first rain. I joined her framed envelope cradled in my hands. The brass seam glinted like lightning frozen mid-strike. Beside the lectern, someone Ezra, I later learned, had bolted an aged dock cleat to the dais boards, the very one father once called the anchor of our name, rust polished away, iron veins visible like history under skin. I set the envelope on an easel cleat beneath it. This scar, I said, tapping the gold seam, reminds us that breakage isn't the end. It's the invitation to mend. A hush spread wide as the river. I outlined the trust charter pensions, secured debts, erased surplus, rolling into yearly scholarships for dock workers' children. Each point drew Nod's soft exhalations, the occasional whispered, "Amen." The union leader stepped up, signing the memorandum that officially renamed the warehouse. Cameras flashed like summer lightning. He handed me a wrench. I knelt and tightened the final bolt, anchoring Father's cleat below the framed seal. Metal groaned, threads catching true. When I straightened, the brass band shifted into an up-tempo swing horns bright as dawn. Cheers rose a tide cresting timber pilings. Mother touched the frame-gloved fingers, pausing on the plaque. "Let justice mend what blood could not." She whispered something I couldn't hear, but I saw her shoulders relax, the years of posture finally softening. The ceremony dissolved into music and laughter. Pecan pie scent drifted from bake sale tables. Children wove through chair legs, chasing soap bubble halos. Reporters gathered quotes. Workers snapped selfies with cranes they'd once cursed in driving rain. Caledonia stood alone a moment, watching it all like someone studying a life she hoped to re-enter. She caught my eye, managed a tentative smile, and drifted toward Mother. Small steps, but steps nonetheless. I slipped from the crowd to the railing at dock's edge. River breeze brought salt and diesel, the eternal duet. Out of my pocket came Father's last envelope, smaller than the first edges worn from months of waiting. I broke the seal. Inside lay a single gold pin shaped like a map tack, and a note in shakier handwriting than I remembered, for when the river turns gold. I looked west toward the sun melting into water, casting molten trails across every ripple. The river had in its way already turned gold. I pinned the tack to my lapel, felt its weight a compass point without a map. Maybe a reminder legacies like rivers don't end. They widen. Behind me, brass horns soared. Someone shouted my name to join a photograph, but I lingered, letting dusk wrap the cranes, the cleat, the scarred envelope, the people who would carry them forward. The tide lapped pilings in a language older than any ledger. I smiled into the wind. Some books balance with numbers, others with promises kept. Tonight the accounts finally matched the current. The sun slipped fully below the cranes, and the envelope on the wall glowed along its golden seam, not as a scar, but as a vein that carried new life through old paper. Watching the crowd drift home, I realized justice hadn't arrived as thunder or fanfare. It came as patient bookkeeping debts cleared pensions, paid grudges, balanced. Sometimes bridges collapse so we can learn which ones are worth rebuilding, and the craft of repair can outshine the first construction. If a family, a company, even a self can be soldered back together, then no ledger is ever past reconciliation. Has life ever handed you a second chance in disguise? And did you dare to take it?